Greetings from the Diocese of Missouri, which sits on the ancestral land of the Osage, Otoa Missouria, and other indigenous peoples. From all of us.
Well, good morning, my people. How we doing? We doing good? Did you have a restful evening? Hopefully. Awesome, awesome. I hope you were able to get a little bit of breakfast. Listen, I just want to say that I'm so glad to be back with good people who are doing good work. And, you know, per usual, 2 days. I feel like we know each other, right? We're family. So I got a story for you. This morning, took the dog on a walk. My dog's name is Rocky. And so Rocky and I, just taking our normal little walk. And we got to the corner and this car kind of just like sped up and then pulled over. I didn't think too much of it because I was just like, okay, whatever. I'm gonna keep walking. However, turned out it was one of my mom's very good sister friends. And as you recall from yesterday, or you may recall from yesterday, I was a caretaker for my mom who transitioned from after dealing with frontal temporal dementia. And so this is one of her very good friends. And so I saw her, it was just like, oh my God, right? And I'm hugging, and it was a good time, right? So we hug, and I said, how are you doing? And she said, she's good, but she has some not so good news. And so I said, okay. And I just listened. And she said, I found out that I have cancer. She says, it's okay though. I'm good. I know God's got me. And I got the support of my family and friends and my grandkids. They keep me together. They make sure I'm eating properly and not eating what I'm not supposed to eat. She said, but I'm okay though. I'm good. And she then said something that really struck me. She said, but it's allowed me to do the things I've been supposed to be doing, like, tell people no and like prioritize myself. And I said, And so it struck me, right? And after practicing the gift of presence, which is what we talked about yesterday with Prentice Hemphill, I acknowledged her feelings, telling her that, I know this is tough, and I'm sorry that she's going through this. But then I offered up a version of our conversation yesterday morning about the core. If you recall, my niece, she's got me on this core workout, and I feel it in every ounce of my body. Now, the core, this is what my swim coach told me about the core. That's Dr. Ayana Raku. She said, anything that causes you opposition or resistance is here to strengthen you. So I told her, my mom's good friend, I said, this has given you the opportunity to make your no, and your yes. It's given you the opportunity to put yourself first and to stand up for you. This is the opportunity for you to engage in that core work. And she was nearly in tears as she explained this is exactly like what she needed. She didn't even know she needed it. Then I politely added, I think my mom told us to meet up on this corner so that we could support each other. Folks, let me just tell you, our seat of fear or our seat of power lives in the psoas muscle that is attached to the bottom of our abdomen and goes through our hips. This is the muscle we use when we're stretching, doing back bends, doing any kind of movement, really. And this muscle, it gets really tight when we sit or cower, like when we're in fear. The muscle gets short and tight. But when you stand up nice and tall, when you extend that muscle, when you stand up again nice and tall and present yourself to the world, open up and stand up, that's your seat of power. So it's either power or fear. You can't use your power if you're afraid of it. Your core helps you to move forward in power. This is why we must actively and intentionally engage our core and to strengthen it. Our core, meaning our core values, our core morals, our core beliefs, our core culture, our core spirituality. This is why we're here, folks, to strengthen our core, because we're standing on business about being unflinching. So remember, I told you I was a high school English teacher. I don't know if I shared, but I also was a basketball coach. So we got to do a little exercise. Right now, I would like for you to sit up tall. And I just want you to engage your core. We're just going to do it. I would say put 30 seconds on the clock, but we don't have to do that. We can just do it for 5 seconds, right? So engage your core. Feel it, right? If you want the six-pack, for the visual of the six-pack, you can do all that crazy stuff that, like all the planks and all that kind of stuff, which my coach, Michaela, my niece, has me doing. However, we can strengthen our core just by intentionally and actively engaging our core when we're sitting, when we're walking, when we're doing anything. That's the good news right there. I mean, you can do all the other stuff, but you can do little things like this. This is also how we heal, by intentionally and actively engaging our core with all the things that we're learning around here. We just have to be intentional about it. So folks, welcome. My name is Dr. April Warren Grice, and I have the privilege and honor of being your hostess with the mostest for this amazing summit. So listen, welcome back to day 2. I hope everyone is well rested and excited for today. Our opening plenary today is titled Toward a Just and Equitable Recovery. We all know that there were and are certain neighborhoods that were heavily impacted by the May 16th tornado. This session will focus on the next phase of recovery for the region, core work, if you will. To moderate this session, I am pleased to welcome Forward Through Ferguson Executive Director Annissa G. McCaskill. Come on through. And we'd like to invite our invited panelists. Come on through, good folks. Let's give them a big round of applause, good people. Welcome Online Summit. We're glad that you could make it. You are here. We love all of you, and we're glad that you're here with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Can't hear you. Everybody had a good breakfast? You ready to dive into some stuff today? So first and foremost, thank you, Dr. April, for being the hostess with the mostest and being a steady rock throughout this, back there dancing. And also, I want to take a moment because I don't think we've said it expressly. Everything that you're seeing has been the product of the Forward Through Ferguson staff working hard. We started this process about a year ago, having the conversation with UMSL about what we wanted to do. We don't have an event planner. This is what staff did, and so if you guys can join me in giving them a huge hand. We wanted everyone to feel comfortable. We wanted everyone to not feel like they were in a corporate space, and we wanted you to feel invigorated and safe, but also to be ready to fight once you leave. And during the midst of everything, we had to pivot. And part of that pivot was the creation of this panel, because on May the 16th, something devastating happened in our region. And we discussed yesterday during the Racial Healing and Justice Fund conversation that if you are ready, you don't have to get ready. And what we found out is the St. Louis region was not ready for what happened. And I have with me some people that I value for their work and also for what they stand for. And when the call came that we needed to pivot, they answered that call. And I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves, who they are, what they do, and I hope that you'll be able to understand as we have this conversation why I wanted them here to have this. There are a number of people that I will say I reached out to that were afraid to have this conversation, but community needs to have this conversation. And in the end, the people who needed to be on this panel are the people who are here because they represent a cross-section of interests and ideas about what it will take to equitably re-envision the North Side and to build it back to what it should be. And so I will start all the way to my left, and then we'll come down and we'll allow the panel to introduce themselves, and then we'll dive into some questions.
Good morning. I am Delesha George. I'm the founder and principal consultant of the Monday Partnership, and I am also the fourth of 5 generations living in the Academy neighborhood of St. Louis City.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Constance. I am the executive director of the North Newstead Association. We are a community development corporation in North St. Louis City, in the heart of where the tornado hit. And since the tornado, we've been helping with recovery efforts for not only our own tenants, but our immediate community as well.
Good morning. My name is Miranda Walker-Jones. I am the president and CEO of the Little Bit Foundation. I'm also president of the Jennings School District. So I am here because we have been working tirelessly with the schools to make sure that kids and families have what they need in this recovery process. So we've started tornado recovery centers in 4 schools, including some of the charter schools, to make sure kids and families have what they need now and getting them ready to go back to school in a week now. In a week.
And good morning again. I'm Brian Hurd. I am the Director of Planning and Implementation at RISE Community Development. Many of you may know we do affordable housing development, but we do it in the context of helping to strengthen and make neighborhoods more equitable. We work in the city of St. Louis County, and then on the Metro East Side, St. Clair and Madison counties as well. We've developed probably about 7,000 homes throughout the past 25 years, probably at about $1 billion in total development cost. We provide lending, we do urban planning services, as well as providing technical assistance and capacity building for organizations like Constance, the North Newstead Association. So we have a deep impact, deep investment in the area where the tornado did hit.
Thank you. So I hope you guys see where we're going with this. We begin this conversation very much rooted in clarity, but also understanding that there's a lot of grief in the community that hasn't been addressed, as well as courage, because it takes courageous conversations to make a difference. Today is also August the 9th, and if you've been walking around, you know that Michael Brown Jr.'s spirit is with us today. But most especially all this week, we chose today as an effort to bring something back to the North County community and to show support to the Brown family, and we're here with their blessing. So as you walk around today, please keep them in your thoughts, but also understand that later on this evening, they will be having an event here as well, and we want to make sure that we give them that support. We're going to start with questions, but I wanted to just make this statement. The cost of repair for the north side of St. Louis City and the West End as well, but just generally in the area impacted by the tornado, is $1.6 billion. So far, the city of St. Louis has allocated $30 million of the $294 million from the RAM settlement, so roughly 10% of that settlement, and potentially, not guaranteed, $5 million in ARPA funding to address $1.6 billion. FEMA says that public agencies, and let's get into it because we talked about philanthropy, right? Public agencies and qualifying nonprofits can receive 75% reimbursement for what they've spent to bring us back. Individuals from FEMA can receive $770 in immediate emergency needs, plus up to $43,600 for home repair and other recovery needs. My question that we're going to start just to meditate on here in the audience as the panel is talking is, how do we repay what is owed? You have families and businesses and individuals who have been on the North Side for several generations, and we're going to hear from one of them 4 or 5 generations in the same neighborhood. How do we repair not just roofs, but relationships and responsibilities? Because what we know is that North St. Louis and the West End were already suffering from disinvestment and lack of attention, unless it was speculative and, in some cases, gentrification. So we're talking not just about disaster recovery, but racial repair and putting right what was never right in the first place for several generations. So we're going to start with questions for Delesha George. Delesha, you've lived through the storm and its aftermath, not just physically, but emotionally, and the systemic issues that have arisen since the storm. What do you want people to understand about what it means to recover, not just from the tornado, but as a resident seeing it from years of being overlooked?
So when I think about recovery, I think about the fact that 10 years from now, my neighborhood is going to look very different. As I said, I'm the 4th of 5 generations in the same neighborhood and in the same house. So my family has had this home since my grandparents and my great-grandmother purchased it in 1961. And there are a lot of families, despite what you may be told and what's portrayed in media, there are a lot of families that have been in these neighborhoods for many, many generations. So when I think about recovery, I get nervous because developers are circling, right? All the interests are not shared interests. And so it was maybe 2 days after the storm, Sunday, after the tornado, I'm sorry. I tend to say tornado sometimes because some areas did get just the storm. We got a direct hit from this tornado. But the grief is real because the recovery is not going to be equitable. We know that a lot of the developers that are coming in are not coming in, and the resources that we are being offered are not being offered for the purpose of bringing back residents who are displaced or who want to rebuild. It's going to look very different. A lot of my neighbors I know are not going to still be there. By the grace of God, we hope to still be there, right? Because no one can assume anything with the way that things are going. So recovery, yes, it is more than just your roof being replaced, and that's another thing that I hope people understand. This is very traumatic. It's a very traumatic situation to experience, and it's also the unknown gives us a lot of anxiety as well.
Thank you. Constance, your work sits at the intersection of neighborhood stability and long-term equity. What policies or funding strategies do you believe are essential right now to keep people housed, safe, and connected? And what work was being done by North Newstead before the tornado that you would like to see escalated and supported in its aftermath?
There's so much I can say here.
I know.
But wanting to build off of what was just said, home repair dollars are so important right now, especially in terms of emergency home repair dollars, things that stabilize existing buildings. Thinking about St. Louis's beautiful brick buildings that are still getting rained into, those buildings will no longer stand if we don't have emergency funding in order to make sure that those are tarped and waterproofed. Insurance, we've heard a lot of stories about insurance. Policy-wise, there needs to be some sort of protection to make sure that people are getting the payout that they're owed, making sure that they're getting the payout that will allow them to return, and making sure that they get the payout that they paid into when they bought the insurance to begin with. I think flexible financial assistance is still very urgent, whether it is for food, for shelter, for transit, for anything like that. Those are still very immediate needs that families are facing. Affordable housing preservation and anti-displacement measures. So thinking about things like emergency funding for rental stabilization, emergency funding for CDCs and affordable housing providers to make sure that we can stabilize our housing as well, and also turn housing so people can move into housing while they're stabilizing their own. Thinking about right to return guarantees for renters to make sure that when we do build back, that they have the opportunity to come back to the existing housing that they were at before and at the same rent level they were at before. We need to think about policies that prevent speculative land purchasing by out-of-town developers. North Newstead, we've already started receiving letters from out-of-town developers looking to buy our buildings as well. So things that other cities have done are mandatory cooling off periods, restricting land purchases immediately after the storm, whether or not it is the city that's going to do it through the LRA or community land trust or any other model. So think about how can we hold on to damaged properties so that they're not picked up by developers in the meantime. Thinking about our existing programs at North Newstead that need to be urgently supported and continued would be our home repair program, our program for elderly services, making sure that our seniors, this program was born during the pandemic, thinking about social isolation. This is still something that is very urgent. So thinking about how do we make sure that people still have platforms so that they can stay connected with one another. And being a communicator. In North Newstead, we host workshops and educational programming with our communities based off what we're hearing. On August 23rd, we're putting on How Do You Rebuild After the Storm, a practical workshop. So those are things that we're going to continue to do, and we hope that people participate and take advantage of the information that's out there.
I think it's important to say that a conversation even before the tornado, the storm, was that community development agencies in the city of St. Louis particularly were already drowning and underfunded. And so when the storm happened, everyone's looking to these organizations that they know because they are actively in community to assist them, tell us what to do, how can we do what we're doing, but they were already struggling, and now you have the extra burden. In addition, we know that immediately after the storm, we had several organizations that are not even in the first response business, for lack of a better term, who activated, went out into community, moved staff from what they were doing to this work, and have yet to be reimbursed. So after this session, I'm going to actually be dropping some things in Whova, some questions for you all to think about as you activate and determine how to agitate for assistance or what is necessary in order to build the North Side back. The panelists have those questions for them to meditate, but I'll be sharing those with you all because I think it's necessary for it to be more than just a conversation or for what you all to read. It's necessary for you to be thinking about what are the strategies that are going to be necessary to help agencies such as Constance's, such as those who activated even though that wasn't their lane, but they did it. Or even for those in community who are now dealing with the fact that speculators are coming in and pressuring them to give up homes that have been in their families for generations. And then also the quality of housing that will be built. You know, what we have right now may not necessarily be able to be there because of structural issues and all sorts of things. What will it take, and how can people rebuild in a way that will not cause harm to them financially, allow them to stay in the neighborhoods that they've been in for generations, but then also have a quality home that they feel comfortable and safe in. Next, I'm actually going to hop in. I'm going to go over to Brian. You got a microphone?
I have the microphone.
You have the microphone. Brian, you spent years helping communities navigate development and displacement. In the wake of the tornado, what are you seeing in terms of equitable rebuilding or missed opportunities, either before the storm or now currently, things that people aren't thinking about when it comes to redeveloping and bringing the North and the West End back together? And how do we prevent disaster recovery from becoming another form of gentrification?
Well, there's a lot of questions.
I know.
But I'll take a stab at it. Can everybody hear me okay? We're good? Okay. It's a very complex issue, as we all know. You have been here since yesterday talking about various issues. So it's not going to take an overnight solution.
Correct.
A lot of this is systemic for hundreds of years, from redlining to covenant deed restrictions, where you couldn't sell your property to a black. All those things are still unraveling, and again, it's going to take time. But what I would say is, this is not just a city of St. Louis thing. It's not just a St. Louis County thing. This is really a 15-county region thing that St. Louis has to deal with. I had the fortunate opportunity to be working on St. Louis County's 2050 comprehensive plan. And for those that don't know, the St. Louis region is losing population. So in St. Louis County, for example, we've had more deaths than we had births. Now you tell me what region in the country can survive long-term with those trends. So the tornado hit May 16th, as we all know, that Friday. And it hit in what I would consider probably the most challenging area of our entire region. One, because there's economic challenges in the area that it hit. It was highly dense. A lot of those neighborhoods were historic neighborhoods or historic buildings. And so if you know anything about historic buildings, it costs a lot of money to replace any of that. And it's hard to find the manufacturers that still do a lot of that work. So the replacement costs, insurance, all of that's out of line. And when you're talking about an economically challenged community already, the hardship and burdens are just there. So what I would say is, going forward, the things that we have to look at for the city of St. Louis and the St. Louis region, and I'm going to be very candid with this, you cannot have a strong region without a strong city.
Correct.
I don't care if it's Detroit and Wayne County, Baltimore, and in that area, you have to have a strong city. That's the only way a region will survive. And so we have people who may be racist or racially biased, or whatever you want to call yourself. If you don't want to say you're racist, you have racial, cultural conditioning thoughts. They may not be supportive. I'm going to tell the truth.
Tell the
truth.
truth.
This is what Brian Hurd does.
That's why you're here.
But I'm going to just say that your children are coming up, and what kind of region do you want them to be in? You can say, well, the city of St. Louis is over here, we are here. That doesn't bother us. No, it does impact you in one way or another. But let me just say this and be very candid with the city of St. Louis and the North Side. There are three things we have to deal with, and we have to be very transparent about it. It's housing, it's businesses, and I mean specifically small micro businesses that are place-based businesses. I don't just mean the mom and dad businesses in the house. We need storefronts. We need visualization, because people have to see commerce happening.
Right.
The third thing is, and we're going to have to talk about it, you cannot have a strong city without a strong public school system. And we have challenges, and like most inner cities have challenges, but the past week, I was in Houston for vacation, came back, I saw an article when I was down there about the city of St. Louis perhaps having to close half of its schools. Correct. What do you think that does with property values? If you have a neighborhood school that closes, that adversely impacts your appraisal values. The other thing is, we saw that the city may be challenged and have some major challenges over the next several years. I guess 2031, I think they predicted that if things don't change, the school system may run out of money. But again, you cannot attract nor retain talent in the workforce if you don't have a strong public school. I don't care how many private schools you have that cost more money than some of the colleges, but you cannot have a strong public school system and not have a strong city. It doesn't happen. So those are things we have to have conversations about in all ways. So the other thing I would say in terms of missed opportunities, and we have to take this as an opportunity to reset, we have to have a strong public information system. And I mean specifically working with residents, training residents about their properties. How do you pass a property from one generation to the next? So a trust. Those are conversations we need to have about how to properly insure your homes, what may need to be needed to help provide some support for insurance. So a lot of that public education is going to be very important because, again, as Constance has alluded to, if people don't have good information, they make bad decisions. So going forward from generation to generation, we need to focus on what that infrastructure looks like. And I will say this, our community development system is not just about housing or affordable housing, it's community building.
Correct.
It's investing in people, it's talking about the resources they need to make sure that their families are set and know where to go for information, for services, whether it's healthcare. Those are the types of things that these organizations need. They need support. And let me just say this, the city of St. Louis government can't be the solution by itself. You can move the headquarters of Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, you can bring any major institution here to St. Louis. They're not gonna have the solutions just with a check. It's gonna take people communicating, working together, building trust, and building that collaboration around a shared vision and what the future may look like. Because I have 2 daughters, and I'm gonna close with this. And I'm sure, does anybody have any college age or older children? Okay, now let me ask you this question. How many of you have children who are going off to college and say they'll never come back to St. Louis? There's a lot of people, and I'm not from St. Louis originally, but I have a lot of friends and people that I've learned. I was down in Texas, as I mentioned last week. There's a whole chapter of St. Louisans.
It's South
down in
St.
Texas.
Louis down in Texas.
Yeah. And there are people who say that they love St. Louis, they love 314 Day, they they want to go get Chinese food, they want the riplets, they want all that. Vest soda.
But in Texas.
But I'm gonna tell you, they're not gonna come back here. And that's a shame to be in a community where people say, the young generation, I want to leave, I don't want to come back. So those are things we just have to deal with in the narrative standpoint, but those investments in dealing with the school system, housing, and the public school system are the 3 things that I think we really need to focus on.
There is literally a St. Louis-style Chinese fried rice restaurant in Houston.
I did not know that.
Yeah. What you said kind of goes to a circle that we were discussing yesterday in the Racial Healing and Justice Fund in CAP for the day, where we talked about how philanthropy is not going to be the sole answer for what needs to happen with nonprofits. And there's a pendulum that swings, and so you have to be ready to grab the pendulum and do what you can when it's swinging your way, but then there also has to be some sort of infrastructure and access to support when the pendulum is not in your direction. So right now, everybody's thinking about what are the resources necessary. So we can strategize and get as much as we can right now, but when something else gets the attention of public structure and philanthropy, what are we going to do? What are the things that we do as community to make sure that we're not reliant just on the pendulum swinging our way? Miranda Walker-Jones. Miranda, as someone working closely with children and families, how are young people being affected by this moment? What do you think we risk losing educationally, emotionally, and developmentally if recovery doesn't account for youth needs?
I think Brian Hurd stole a whole lot of my thunder here talking about the public school system, but that's exactly where we need to talk about. We have no idea what it's going to look like next week. Kids don't even know where they're going to school quite yet, and when they walk in the door, they don't know what they're going to expect. I will say my agency, we serve 17,000 kids in 54 schools, all the way far south as Hancock Place, as far north as Riverview and East St. Louis, and 20 schools in St. Louis public schools. And it was our schools, the ones that we serve, that got hit the hardest. When you talk about Ashland, Yateman, Sumner, all of these schools. And I'll tell you that I was literally at Ashland 30 minutes before the tornado hit. A beautiful day, started off, it was field day for a lot of the schools, so we had the privilege, our staff were fanned out all over, and 30 minutes later, the world changed. And Ashland is one of those schools that will not reopen, and I would imagine that that's gonna be one of the hardest schools to reopen, period. So when we talk about, communities and you talk about, the health of your community, the future of your community, people ask, and how are the children, right? Our children are not well. Therefore, our community is not well. When you look at St. Louis public schools in its heyday, They had over 100,000 students in the St. Louis Public Schools. We are down to about 18,000 kids in the St. Louis Public Schools. And people are not going to necessarily want to hear this because people are outraged about we may be closing schools, but something has to happen. You have 68 school buildings with 18,000 children. Do the math. You have an average of 200 kids in a building, 200, 300 kids in a building. Something has to happen. And I think we need to, as a community, we have to have a real conversation about what does the public school system look like in the city of St. Louis. And it fans out because what happens in the city of St. Louis is going to affect what happens in Jennings and what happens in Normandy and what happens in Riverview because we're sharing the same kids over and over and over again. We talk a lot about our COVID kids and the things that they are experiencing because they were out of school for a year or going virtual and their social skills and all those different things. Just wait for our tornado kids, because we haven't even started to have the real conversation about what a kid that is at Yateman and now is going to be going to Blewett, maybe, when they walk in that door, what is going to happen? They're not familiar with their surroundings. We're taking them out of one neighborhood into another neighborhood. Some of them are leaving homes or coming from hotels. People are still not taking into consideration that they might not even have a stable house yet. There are so many unanswered questions and so many conversations that are not centering on our children. And that is truly what the future of our region is going to depend on, is how do we show up for our children? What state are they in? And what does their future look like? So we have a lot of unanswered questions. I think when school starts next week, people are going to be really surprised at how many kids show up or don't show up or where they show up. We don't even know yet. So this is going to be something that is not just happened May 16th, not something that we took care of over the summer. This is going to be a longer problem that we're going to see drive all into this school year. And then the big picture is what are we going to do with our public school system, period, in the St. Louis region.
So I have a reflection, and you panelists can dive in. And we'll also ask for some questions from the floor because we have some time, because I think we go to 10 o'clock, so we're doing good on time, y'all. I want to come back to what Miranda was talking about, because Brian very strongly was mentioning the necessity of making sure that we have good schools, because schools attract people. When, I don't know about y'all, when I bought my house, I looked at the school district. I had the privilege of being able to look at the school district. I want to be clear. Or even before I bought my house, when I rented, I looked at the school district. So, and any of you can jump in because you all work in community, you kind of see the impact of this. What would a recovery plan ideally look like that includes youth and schools from the beginning? And I'll change that because I sent you guys this question. Youth, schools, and housing from the beginning. What would it look like for development to actually prioritize those things? Pretty much the three things that you were talking about. And I didn't say you had to answer first, but thank you for grabbing the mic.
No. Actually, this is good, and I'll be quick with it. Good news, and this is just not a plug by any means, but RISE is part of a consulting team that was hired by the city before the tornado. We just got under contract, but we will be doing the plan for what they call Planning Area 4, which is an area that includes the Hamilton Heights, Wells Goodfellow, Kingsway West, O'Fallon, Penrose, Fairground, College Hill neighborhood. So that 7-neighborhood cluster. So that planning process will involve deep, robust community engagement. So it's not just a downward approach, but it's really taking into consideration the lived experiences of residents, property owners, businesses, and really putting together a comprehensive plan that hopefully will also address things around resiliency, the environment, to plan for the future. So neighborhood housing, but also the goal would be to include schools and education, youth programs as well. So the social services side of things, so that as Miranda mentioned before, it's not just the education, but it's also what happens even after school or even during the summer. What are we doing to invest in our youth? Because again, we want safe, thriving, resilient neighborhoods and communities. So we'll have a chance. This was before the tornado hit, but after the tornado, this gives us a chance to really look a little even deeper than our original scope with the city. But we're happy to get that underway. We'll be launching that community engagement process in late September, early October. So we're there. We'll have a chance to be a part of the rebuilding and planning for the future. But the key piece is not just beginning to rebuild. We got to really plan, and that means looking at density. That means looking at design types of housing, all those different things in terms of what the future may look like for that particular area.
And what we know is a lot of times when grants or funding comes available for housing, it doesn't address families. And so this is, I think, probably maybe a good way for that to be different than what we've seen. Constance, were you getting ready to say something? I saw Delesha hand you the microphone.
I think working with existing housing providers that are grounded in community is important. Organizations like North Newstead Association, a majority of our board are residents within our service area. So working with organizations that have deep roots, that have been there. Our North Newstead has been there for 32 years. We have deep roots. We're right down the street from Ashland. We know the students that go to Ashland. So working with us and other housing providers to do a comprehensive rebuild is very important because we would be able to provide the not just the house, not just the four walls, but the supportive services for the folks that will be inside those walls as well.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think the community has to speak up about what we want to see with our schools. Nobody can argue with the Bulldog Nation from Sumner because they have an alumni group that will speak up, that will talk, they will come and do whatever they need to do to protect their school. But where are the parents in this in talking about what the plans are? You know, we need to be at these school board meetings. We need to have conversations to say, you want my baby to go to this building, you want my baby to do this, to really have conversations about why we are making the choices that we're making. And I think we are not giving our kids enough credit that they could be put into a school that is a nice building with other students and say that there's going to be behavior challenges and all these other things. You would rather put them in a building that hasn't been opened in years. I think we have a lot of conversations, and parents should be really more involved, and our communities have to get a lot more involved about, because we have to speak up for our children, and we have to speak up for what they need and what they want. And it's not fair for our children to have to be in buildings that were deplorable to begin with. And the investment, we have to make an investment in our public schools.
I think what we are seeing also is that there's a lot of fatigue because you had people who were, for lack of terminology, living on the margins anyway, struggling to feed their families, struggling to have sustainable work, struggling to pay the bills. And now we're telling them that they have to come and fight some more. And the question is, and this is rhetorical because we don't have a lot of time, is what can be done to make fighting more accessible? Because right now we expect them to come to the school board. When is the school board going to come to them and meet them where they are? And that's just part of my thinking, because I think that if they're brought to the table, or if the table is brought to them, the parents have a lot to say. But sometimes just even getting to the meeting means missing work, all sorts of things. So I think there's a conversation to be had about even the accessibility of being able to be brought to the table.
And to that point, I was just going to say that I think it's important not just to have a listening session, but when the decisions are being made, that youth voices are also at the table to say yay or nay that we're going to do or we're not going to do. Because what we cannot do is discount these kids. They do grow up, and so, and we love them dearly. Even when they do tap our nerves, they warm our hearts, and we know that they are our future. So when I look at my daughter, I'm so proud of her. But when I think about 10 years from now, she's going to be somewhere out here leading something. And I want her to know that just because she's 19, that doesn't mean that her voice doesn't matter. So I think it's really important to have them as a voting member of something. If you have a youth advisory, let it not just be an advisory, but let their vote count so they see their decision factored into whatever policies are being implemented, whatever changes are happening. Because if they don't see themselves, they feel like, why should we? And there are some kids, even if their parents are not as involved, they may have their ear to the ground in a way that, may surprise you, but they're paying attention.
So we have time. I think I'm going to take 2 questions. If anybody has questions from the audience, otherwise I can give you, oh, we have a question. I need you to stand up and speak loudly.
Right, I can do that.
Or actually,
Good morning. I'm actually here on assignment, but
can you guys hear okay?
yeah, can y'all hear me? Yeah. Okay. I am St. Louis born and bred. I also went to so this is my alma mater. So to be in this space is just really reaffirming for me that I'm supposed to be here. So thank you all for hiring me for the job.
You're doing a great job, by the way.
Thank you. I cannot remember your name. I'm so sorry. Yes.
Miranda.
Miranda, Superintendent of Jennings. You mentioned that the school populations went from 100,000 to 18,000. Can you specify the time period? And then also the cultural impact as to why that's happening. I only ask because I don't live in that particular area. I live in the Parkway School District, but all of my kids go to private school because no matter, to me, the district, our culture is not, it's just not inviting anymore. And as someone who did graduate from PWI, both college and high school, I just don't trust it anymore. I've lost a lot of trust in my children being able to maintain their cultural identity, be accepted, and then also continuing to strive for better, work 10 times harder just to get, the minimum. It's too much pressure as a parent, and I'm a very involved parent, especially in my kids' education. I homeschool my youngest children, and my son is now 12. I homeschool him all the way up to this point. So can you speak to that time period from when that happened and the cultural impact and why that may be, why you think that may be going on?
Yeah, and I'm actually a board member in Jennings. I will not take Dr. Knight's job as superintendent.
Please don't take Paula's job.
I'm just a board member. But I pulled out my phone because I want to get it right, and I actually have the time frame that you asked about. So in 1967, that was the peak enrollment in St. Louis Public Schools. It was 115,543 kids. That was 1967. In 1991, it was 43,281. In 2024, last year, it was 19,600. So when you talk about from 1967 at 115,000 to 2024 at 19,600, that's the time frame. So you talk about culture, we understand, I grew up in East St. Louis. So when you talk about that same migration in 1960s, East St. Louis was one of the #1 cities in the country, was voted all-American city in the United States. And then you have, all of the things that happen in the migration, and then you see what has happened in East St. Louis, which is, a lot of Caucasian people left the community. We started, again, you would see, you can overlap race, you can overlap the migration of people leaving the community with the decline in that school system. I will say, when I look at District 189, the thing that I'm most proud of is if you've never walked into East St. Louis Senior High School right now, you walk into that school, it's gorgeous. It's beautiful. You walk into school, you're proud to be there. They have people that look like us on the walls. They have a Hall of Fame. They're doing what they can to reclaim the community, to reclaim our history and our culture. And when you walk there, it's not just you hear about the City of Champions and you hear about a great football team, but what they're doing inside the school matters. And I think, we have to make some decisions in St. Louis public schools about, what are we going to do with our culture inside the schools? You're absolutely right. I mean, you don't trust it. You want your kids to be in a school that is inviting, that is safe, that has all the bells and whistles. And unfortunately, our schools, a lot of them in St. Louis public schools and some of our schools don't have all the bells and whistles. And if we have the opportunity to give them that, then we're gonna try to get our kids where they can get the most and they can get more. So we have to start to invest in the schools. We need to get more bells and whistles. The principal at Vashon told me, Vashon's a beautiful building. If you've never been there, it's beautiful. She says, we have no resources. No one wants to come down here and do programs and do things here in Vashon, and it's 3 blocks from the NGA. So, are we going to invest in Vashon? I said, we're here. We're going to be with you. We're here. We need people to come back and see the beauty in what the schools that we have, to invest in those schools, to give the bells and whistles. And, while we're going down, I mean, surely, with the birth rates and everything else, who knows if our children, the birth rates and the population is going to go up, but we've got to do something with what we have right now.
Something to be very clear about, post-World War II, as covenants were starting to be broken and more areas of the city became accessible, you started to see the beginnings of white flight. That's also when they destroyed Chinatown in downtown St. Louis City, where the stadiums are. That's when Mill Creek Valley, 450 acres right there where the soccer stadium and a large part of the middle core bordering downtown, Black families, business owners, schools were pressed out. And we still have not brought the city back, but you had right there commerce and community and people who really loved where they were, and they were pushed out. A lot of them were pushed out to the county. Some of them were pushed into public housing. But that was the beginning of white flight leaving. One of the things to be aware of is from 1951 until 1999, the tornado signal system had not been updated for that period of time. We talk a lot about the tornado and the fact that people didn't hear it. From 1999 until currently, the tornado system has not been completely updated. It's been contracted for, and they contracted for that in 2024. But at the time that the tornado started, or occurred on May the 15th, the system was not, the update was not completed, only contracted for. So when we talk about disinvestment being tied to white flight, it affects the schools and it affects our emergency response.
100%.
100%. And there's a hand right there, and we're going to come to you right there on the, my friend with, right there, you, yes? Can you stand up and speak loudly for me? There's nothing quick about this.
There's no.
None of this will be quick. It has to be consistent. I'll let others speak, but I'll tell you up front, it's not going to be quick. It has to be consistent. And luckily, because you have another job, maybe you can put some time on your schedule. If you know who your elected officials are, if you know who are the people who are working in those offices who impact policy, who are the organizations that you want to ally yourself with that are doing this work. So maybe you don't have the time to do it yourself, but can you give resource and support to those organizations that do that work?
Can I just jump in real quick? And that's an important piece. There's a lot of LLCs, limited liability corporations, people buying up properties. They don't care anything about St. Louis, from states like California, wherever it may be. They're looking for the tax write-off, because when properties are depressed, they can write it off as part of some investment strategy. And I don't think it's just individuals. I think it's probably some large investment firms that are doing some of this. So I would say in this age of technology, if we have some great researchers and people who can find out who's behind these LLCs, put a face to it, that is one thing that you don't need government for. And I know we have some very smart people who can find out anybody behind a computer. So that would be one thing. But I do, to your point, say that needs to be raised as a major priority in local government in the city. who is behind these LLCs, because a lot of them, again, are from out of state. They don't care about the neighborhoods. It's all about a tax write-off, mitigating their tax liability status.
And the good thing is that other cities have dealt with this before. People always, I'm not from St. Louis, but my mom always asks me, Constance, what are you still doing there? And my answer is always the same, and that is, in St. Louis, you are close to power. So if you know your alder, schedule some time, meet with them. Our alders are trying to figure out how they can also respond to this in a way. They've never lived through a tornado before. They've never created a policy after a tornado before. So plant those seeds, have conversations with them. Talk to them about New Orleans and their programs about cooling down and mandatory periods. Talk to them about their lot next door program where they're limiting purchases to just the people who are living immediately next to those properties or nonprofits that are existing there. Look at other cities and see how they've dealt with dealing with preventing people from speculating and buying up properties, and talk to your alder people about how you can do that. And if they don't want to listen, talk to another alder person. The city is small, and you're closer to power than you think. And then in addition, look at yourself and your own network. If you have attorneys in your network, that's going to be so important right now. We've heard of know your rights trainings with attorneys. We need attorneys to be doing know your options trainings. We need to make sure that we're talking to our community so they know what their options are, so that when they are approached by speculators or when they are approached by the pressures to sell, especially when rain is still coming into their properties and they don't know how to rebuild, that they know who to turn to help advocate for them if they don't know how to do it themselves.
There's a group currently called, and we're going to close shortly. I'll let Miranda say something and Delesha, and we'll have to close out because unfortunately we only had an hour. There's a group, you find them on Facebook, called the Coalition. The Coalition is made up of Black realtors, members of the Mountain City Bar Association, so Black attorneys, as well as Black insurance professionals who are outside, literally on the pavement, going door to door, providing resource and assisting people in their claims and in their legal concerns, because what they know is that a lot of these people are so busy just living life and trying to maintain that they can't get to whatever center, but also it's very, very confusing. And in some instances, you need to have someone. So I was going to have one of those people on the panel, but she's outside right now. So it's called the Coalition. They are on Facebook. And if you can't find it, message me and I can connect you with them if you want to find out more about them. We're getting ready to close out, and then I'm going to run to another panel. I want to thank each and every one of you for answering the call for this conversation, but give me 3 words, and I know it's hard, Brian, 3 words about how you're feeling moving forward in the wake of the tornado. And you don't have to go first, Brian. You're just sitting next to me. But just think about it. And actually, I'm going to ask Constance, and then Delesha, and then Miranda, and then Brian, because Brian's looking like he's thinking hard. 3 words about how you're feeling. Are you ready? Go ahead.
Hey, I'll jump in.
I just need three words, Brian. 3.
So I'm a believer. I'm hopeful, okay? I just believe in the faith of things. I'm optimistic, which means I see the signs that there is progress and things that can be made. And I'm competitive. And I think we as a region should be competitive. We should be ready to battle the Detroits, the Clevelands. We should make the St. Louis region the best region it can be. And this begins with our generation. So all the stuff that happened before us, let's be ready to battle, go forward. Let's make this region by working together, collaborating, believing in one another, and all the naysayers that have all the negative things. Let's look at this as the glass is half full.
The thing about going first is then people don't take your words. So that was smart. That was a smart move. So I'm going to say, I don't have 3 words, but I said, must think bigger. We have to think bigger. So I'm going to let that be a sentence. And we, I'm going to say we must think bigger.
Thank you. See?
I'm similar. I have too many emotions. There's a lot of conflicting emotions, a lot that I'm going through. But I'm going to take a page from your book, and three words I would say that's key to what we've been talking about would be formalize community voice.
Collaboration. Please don't start another nonprofit organization for the person. And I say that with love, but I say that because there are so many nonprofit organizations already, but there are a number that are doing amazing work, and they could use the capacity, the additional capacity, even by way of volunteers. So for the person who was wondering how to get in there, research those that are already doing it and get in there. And I would say support and anxiety. Those are the words that come to mind for me.
So 1 hour went quickly. It went so quick. And I know that there are lots of questions and things like that. So everybody did download the Hoover app. I checked. If you have questions for individuals, you can do that. If you want to shoot something to me, you can shoot something to me. I will be loading some things to consider and some meditative thoughts on what we've talked about today that will hopefully spur you to agitate and consider some things. We've been talking about building the core and strengthening ourselves. And I think the way you all ended it gave us food for thought of what we need to strengthen and how we can flex those muscles to go out and do more. And so with that, I thank you all for coming. The next step, Dr. April, are you coming back? Dr. April's coming back to tell us what to do next.
First of all, can we give this amazing panel a round of applause? Outstanding. Because what I heard, y'all know what I heard. What did I hear? Strengthen your core. All I heard was core work. What I wrote down, because you know I took notes and whatnot, I wrote down intentional and consistent. If we think about the core work physically, if you want to gain muscles and build your core, you have to be intentional. Like right now, you could engage your core. I mean, no one will know if you do or you don't. But you could intentionally engage your core right now, being intentional and being consistent. So here's what I'm going to ask us to do. We're about to transition to our next panel. And what I'd like for you to do, I'm going to invite you to engage your core when you stand up, when you go to the restroom, when you go get a drink of water, whatever. But intentionally engage your core, even if it's just for 5 seconds, just so you can get in the habit of practicing, because doing this core work, it has to be a practice. Love is a practice, healing is a practice, core work is a practice. So I have a few reminders before we switch to our next panel. Let's see here. So the reminders. Lunch, both lunches take place at 11:30 a.m., track 1 in the 2 Hill and track 2 in the Student Center. The second reminder is to take the survey in the app. Lastly, if we could give our panelists one more round of applause, that'd be great. Thank you.